I was shocked to discover that my husband cheated with my son's 18-year-old girlfriend. I'm going to use pseudonyms for everyone mentioned in this post. I'm 41 years old, a stay-at-home mom, and my husband, whom I'll call Paul, is 48. He works in finance. We've been married for almost 20 years and have 2 kids. Eric, our 18-year-old son, who is currently a senior in high school, and Mary, our 15-year-old daughter. Both of them are the light of my life. Over the years, my marriage with Paul has become a bit stale for various reasons, such as his demanding work schedule and how I've changed physically since we first met. Our son, Eric, has been dating a girl named Amy since they were freshmen in high school. He absolutely adores Amy. She's his first love, and I've always considered her part of the family. That's what makes the situation so painful for me. Last week, I accidentally saw something on Paul's phone, a text message thread between him, and Amy caught my eye. I froze when I saw her text saying she missed eating his sausage. I couldn't believe it. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself that I must have misread it, but I hadn't. Over the next few days, I found a file on Paul's computer filled with BDSM porn, which confirmed he had a porn addiction. I also discovered he had saved pictures of Amy from her Instagram on his computer. While the photos weren't inappropriate, she was fully clothed. It was enough evidence for me to know I wasn't imagining things. I continued to check his phone during moments when I could, and I found more interactions between him and Amy. I wish I hadn't looked. The way I saw it was by accident. He was on his phone and didn't have iMessage open on the screen, but the app was still running. On an iPhone, when you swipe up, it shows all the open apps, and you can close them. Paul compulsively closed his apps, but in doing so, he accidentally revealed the message thread with Amy. He didn't even realize he'd left it open. When I first saw the messages between Paul and Amy, it felt like a punch to the gut. My hands trembled as I held his phone. The words on the screen felt like slashes across my heart. It wasn't just a shock of betrayal. It was the way they talked about me. Paul had taken the insecurities I shared with him and turned them into cruel jokes for his amusement with Amy. They were filled with mean and horrible comments at my expense, with Paul constantly comparing me to her. He called me fat and old, among other things, while Amy responded with laughing emojis. In one message, Paul wrote, "Can you believe she tried to wear that dress last night? It looked like a sausage trying to burst out of its casing." Amy replied with a string of laughing emojis and added, "She's so old, she probably thinks it's still in style." It wasn't just comments about my appearance. They also criticized my intelligence, my interests, and the way I spoke. Words like boring, dull, and predictable were used to describe my life, the life I had built with him. Each message felt like they were erasing the love and respect I thought we shared for nearly 2 decades. At one point, I read a message from Paul that said, "At least you're fun. Being with her is like living in slow motion." Amy replied, "LOL, you need someone who can keep up with you, not slow you down." It was as if I wasn't even a person to them, just an obstacle to joke about while they carried on with whatever this was between them. Sitting there, reading each message, I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and more insignificant. These weren't just idle words. They were a glimpse into how little they valued me. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The man who was supposed to love me most, my husband, had been cheating with Amy, the very girl I had mentored and considered family. It was devastating to see the two of them laughing together, mocking me. The betrayal cut deep. Paul's betrayal, but hers as well. It was a double-edged sword that tore through my heart. I closed the app, the screen going dark, and looked up at the family photos hanging on the wall. The contrast between the happy, smiling faces in those photos and the scornful words I had just read was overwhelming. In that moment, surrounded by the echoes of their laughter, I realized that the man I married was no longer the man in those pictures. I wondered how many times they had shared a laugh at my expense. How many times had my pain been their punchline? For so long, I had trusted Paul. I had ignored the small signs, the gut feelings, even when I found a thong in our bedroom last month that didn't belong to me or our daughter. I convinced myself that it was probably our daughters, even though it didn't make sense. But now, the reality was clear. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was betraying our son, too. The depth of the betrayal was beyond what words could describe. The anger, the shock, the dread, I couldn't process it all. My mind was racing, trying to understand how this could have happened. How did I not see it? How could I have been so blind? Amy had just turned 18 5 months ago, and suddenly, Paul's behavior had changed. I couldn't figure out when their affair had started, but I knew it had been going on for months. He deleted his texts every couple of weeks, making it nearly impossible to track their communication. Did he wait for her to turn 18 before pursuing this? How long had they been hiding this from me? I felt paralyzed by fear. I couldn't even begin to imagine how to tell our son. Eric adores Amy, and the thought of breaking his heart made my stomach turn. How would I explain this sickening truth to him? It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about his heart and mind and the devastating impact this could have on him. And then there was Mary, too. She was just as innocent in all of this, yet she would be caught in the fallout as well. I hadn't confronted Paul yet. I was too scared to see the aftermath of what would happen. How would he react? How would this unravel? I didn't know who to turn to first. I wasn't sharing my story for sympathy. I was looking for advice, for understanding from others who had dealt with betrayal like this. I knew action needed to be taken, but I had to be strategic and careful. I needed to protect myself, gather all the evidence, and make sure I was ready for whatever came next. I want to make it clear that not telling Eric about this was never an option for me. I dread it, but I know it has to be done. It's part of the process, part of the plan. Right now, I'm playing dumb, collecting evidence, and preparing myself for the storm that's about to hit. I'll update everyone when I can, but I can't express enough how much your support means to me right now. It's helping me feel less alone in this nightmare. My brother connected me to a tough lawyer. I've saved screenshots of all Paul's conversations with Amy. I managed to get the last 3 months from his iCloud. The conversations were full of flirty, explicit talk, and it was hard to read. There were several insults about me, and his call history showed he'd been talking to her for hours. He uses dating apps, and I took screenshots of his profiles and chats with other matches. He filters for girls around 18 to 22, and I copied files from his computer, which revealed he's active in sex chat rooms and spends money on OnlyFans. I found toys, outfits, and more hidden around the house. I had to tell Eric and Mary, so I picked them up from school and drove them to my brother's. They sensed something was wrong right away. I explained everything to them, and I broke down. Mary was angry, more so than Eric. I also met with Amy's mom, who confiscated Amy's phone and gave me the chat logs, which only went back 3 months. Amy was clearly crying when confronted, but she told her mom that she and Paul were in love. It's obvious he had been a father figure to her, using that to manipulate her. I confronted Paul over Zoom. My heart was pounding as soon as I joined the call. His face was flushed, his hair disheveled. He was panicked, defensive, and his voice trembled. I tried to stay calm and told him I had seen everything, his messages, the photos, the whole affair. He immediately denied it, shouting that I was making things up. His reaction was so violent that I had to pull the laptop back. It was like a fuse had been lit, and he was losing control. "Paul, we need to talk about this." I tried again, but he cut me off. "You don't understand the context," he yelled, his hands shaking, gripping papers on his desk. "Please, we need to talk about how we're going to handle this with the kids," I pleaded, trying to remain calm, but his anger only escalated. "You have no right to take my kids away," he screamed, slamming his fist on the desk. "You're destroying everything." I was terrified. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. I tried to reason with him, but it was clear he wasn't going to admit to anything. He was more focused on trying to cover up the truth. I noticed beads of sweat forming on his forehead. That's when I realized the true extent of his fear. The intensity in his eyes, the venom in his voice. It was clear. This was a man losing control. It wasn't just about infidelity anymore. I was now facing someone who posed a serious threat to my safety and to the children. His behavior was alarming, almost as if he were right there beside me, ready to snap. His constant shouting of the word context, repeating that none of that happened, made no sense. He stuttered through his words, his speech chaotic, and I felt the danger in the air. I refused to tell him where I was. He raged, claiming I had no right to take his kids. "I'm ending this call, Paul. We'll talk when you can do so calmly," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just hang up on me. You can't just—" He didn't get the chance to finish before I ended the call. My heart was pounding in my ears. I stared at the blank screen of my Zoom call, realizing how much more serious the situation had become. His response wasn't just offensive, it was volatile. I immediately called my lawyer, explaining the urgency of filing for a restraining order. His aggression was enough to convince me that I had to protect myself and my kids. What started as a conversation about confronting him turned into a chilling revelation. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about our safety. My lawyer immediately filed for temporary sole custody of Mary and a restraining order. Mary, understandably, was furious with her father and Amy. She's been reflecting on past moments when she saw how her father interacted with her friends, and it's been eating at her. Eric is hurting too, but he's holding it together. He's incredibly strong and level-headed, and he wants to see a therapist. I'm so proud of how mature my kids are handling all this. They don't deserve any of this. Eric hasn't spoken to Amy since he found out. I'm not sure if he ever will again. He and I have both been tested. No telling how many women Paul has been involved with. As for Amy, her mom has been in contact with me. Amy's been threatening to run away with Paul because she's convinced they're in love. We've informed the authorities about everything. I plan to be ruthless in this divorce. Reflecting on everything I've endured has been painful. For years, I was made to feel worthless, but I'm done. I won't let him get away with it. I'll reinvent myself, stronger than ever. Thank you again for all the love and encouragement. It's been a huge comfort to me. I've also received many comments accusing me of faking the story, but in a way that provides comfort too. It feels unreal, even to me. So hearing others doubt it just confirms my own feelings. I wish this were fake. I've been focusing too much on how others are reacting to this, neglecting my own feelings. I'm trying to change that. Right now, I'm swinging between anger and numbness. My kids and I are safe at my brother's house, where we've set up precautions. Paul has called me several times a day, but I won't engage with him. My lawyer is handling all communication. Frankly, I'm scared of him. We've been tested, and so far, both Eric and I are clean according to rapid tests. We'll know for sure once lab results come back, but I'm not overly concerned. I've scheduled a therapy session for Eric next week. He needs professional help to navigate this maze of hurt and betrayal. It's not just a betrayal. It's from his father, someone he looked up to, and from Amy, who was practically part of our family. Eric is trying to be strong for me, but I can see it's weighing on him. He often asks, "How are you holding up, Mom?" His maturity is heartbreaking for his age. I can see he's shouldering part of the burden. He's not interested in contacting his dad at all. When I mentioned Paul the other day, there was a brief flicker of anger, or maybe pain, in his eyes, quickly masked by neutrality. "I don't have anything to say to him right now," he said, and that was that. I get the sense that Paul is terrified. I think he knows that if he's investigated thoroughly, he's in big trouble. The more I think about the Zoom call, the more I realize how badly he's unraveling. The panic in his face was undeniable. I offered to make an appointment for Mary with a therapist too, but she doesn't want to see one yet. She said she's open to it later, but she needs time. She's been talking to her friends about her dad, and they've shared some unsettling things with her. They noticed how he stared at them, especially one of Mary's friends, who felt like he was checking her out and complimenting her inappropriately. I'm embarrassed that they had to go through that. I know a lot of people feel that Amy is also a victim in this situation, and I agree. I've done what I can to help her indirectly, letting her mom know and giving her opportunities to seek help. Unfortunately, she's still in denial. She believes she and Paul are in love, and she's refusing any help. She thinks I'm the villain in all this, and no matter what her mom shows her, she refuses to believe it. Amy is convinced I photoshopped screenshots of Paul's dating app profiles. She believes everyone is mad because she found herself a real man and says I'm jealous because she takes better care of him than I did. It's all in line with some of the things Paul has said about how I'm not fulfilling him sexually. Amy seems determined to be with Paul no matter the cost. I think it's possible Paul's grooming of her started when Eric began dating her. Her infatuation with him is so strong that it can't be just a few months of a relationship. She's only 18, and I think Paul has been influencing her for much longer. I just hope she realizes the truth eventually, but right now, I can't intervene without making it worse. Maybe one day, she'll come to her senses. The support continues to be overwhelming, and I'm deeply grateful. Unfortunately, I've been receiving a lot of negative, accusatory private messages from people who think I'm faking the story. Someone even made a comment claiming my story has been debunked, and now others are believing it. I've seen an uptick in negative messages accusing me of making this up for money. I'm not asking for money. I came here because I needed emotional support, not financial help. I'm not looking for anything other than comfort from sharing my story. If you don't believe me, that's fine, but please don't send mean-spirited, accusatory messages. The only reason I'm still posting is because of the support from those who care. The divorce is progressing, though I'm not going into specifics for now. I have temporary custody of Mary, and Paul has to pay temporary child support. There's a protective order in place, so he can't contact us or come near us. While the legal process continues, I'm confident that there's overwhelming evidence against Paul, and it will have long-term consequences for him. Justice will come. But right now, I have to stay vague about some things to avoid making it more complicated. Eric has been to therapy twice, and we're working hard to make sure he knows he's supported and loved. Mary is still angry, but she's mostly turned that anger into sadness. I'm hoping she'll be open to therapy soon. Her friends have been a huge support for her during this time. Amy has been spending more time with Paul, despite her mother's concerns and efforts to intervene. Amy is still insisting she's an adult and can make her own decisions. Her mother is exhausted from trying to convince her otherwise. I don't know where this will go, but I'm hoping for clarity soon.